Tony Blair's blue sky thinker, Lord Burt, would not appear before the Public Administration Committee until he'd left the job. We had high hopes that some secrets might be revealed.
About the style of your reports, I've got the drug report here. I noticed that every page is headlined with a lowercase simple sentence. It's full, every page, of pie charts, bullet points. Everything is repeated at least twice, and further examples are given. It's exactly the kind of way that a good junior school teacher would communicate with an 8-year-old. I mean, is this the way you think is the best to communicate with the Prime Minister?
I wonder how much experience you've had of the private sector, because if you went into any private sector institution, any major corporation, any new
I don't think you're asking the question. I mean, do you think this is the right way to communicate with the Prime Minister? I've got a number of other questions I'd like to ask.
I'm happy to come to that.
Okay,
I think you would find in any modern corporate environment exactly the same set of techniques being used.
The report itself is very different from anything that's been produced by government probably in the last 30 years in its objectivity, in the fact that it's evidence-based and is free from the hysteria which the subject of drugs is normally described. It's very different from what has been produced there, very similar to reports like the Ransom report and the Select Committee reports in this House in its conclusions. Are you disappointed with the response from government on the conclusions that you reached?
I'm afraid I'm very happy to talk to the committee about the sort of issues that have been raised so far, namely the way in which government structures itself to address strategic questions, but I'm afraid I don't want to go into any of the detail of my advice to the Prime Minister or the response to that advice.
You see, the purpose of our inquiry is that we believe there is a role for, say, a committee of the future that would look in this dispassionate way at these issues that haven't been solved, that are ones that have bedeviled successive governments without any solutions coming out. And it's important to us, if we assess the value of the existing bodies, such as the strategy unit. I mean, in your report, you made one conclusion, which was that the ineffectiveness of attempts to control drugs on the supply side. But governments, American government, our government, trying to do precisely that in Afghanistan, and you rightly point out the futility of this and how this was counterproductive in Colombia. Now, if we can make a sensible judgment on the value of your work and the other bodies that are forecasting the future, we surely should know what likely effect it's having now on government policy.
Well, I'm happy to address the question in general with the caveat I've already expressed. And I would say, and I have to emphasise that this must not be characterised as my work. We're talking about a body. I had a great deal of help on all of the projects with which I was involved, and alongside that there is a huge body of work developed by the strategy unit and other parts in government, which has a very similar approach to the approach that you've identified in the drug report. The methodology, the committee may be interested in some of the methodology. Pretty much all strategy unit reports are in two phases, and I'm coming to your question, are in two phases. The first we used jokingly to refer to as a policy-free zone. In other words, it was simply an attempt to describe, to get to the bottom of the matter in hand, to understand. The best way of understanding the future is to understand the past. It's a fantastically difficult thing to do. It often takes months and months and months of activity. Some of the pages that you referred to there, I can think of some of the pages in that report where a very distinguished civil servant spent 6 months of his life analysing the data, which would give you the key insight reflected in one of those pages.
Encouraging. But if we could look at the previous government's policy in this area were evidence-free, generally, and you're providing evidence, and I said, I'm full of admiration from this report. You said it didn't affect on government departments. When the report was it presented to the Prime Minister alone?
No. No.
What was the circulation?
It was presented to all of the key departments involved, which there were many.
And were you disappointed by the reaction?
Well, I've already said that I'm afraid I don't want to go into the detail of what recommendations were made or what the response was. I've tried to answer helpfully in general terms.
This report that you produced would have been poorer if you knew it was going to come into the public domain. I mean, is that true? There are conclusions that you reach which are uncomfortable for the government is charging off in one direction, you're pointing in another direction. Now what does this say for future reports of this kind? If you knew this report was going to come into the public domain, how much poorer would it be?
Well, I think the reality, which is self-evident, as I've said earlier, that I do think it is reasonable that governments think in private. It's neither one thing or the other. Yes, we must.
Yes. The parliamentarian should be denied the best thinking of the government. I mean, I have this report which has on it confidential policy on every page, and it wouldn't have been available to me as another parliamentarian who take an interest in this subject, whereas the pack produced by all governments on this is available.
Yeah. We have a tension here which is not easily resolved. On the one hand, the need for the widest possible information to be available to Parliament and to the citizenry at large. On the other, the reasonable inclination of politicians in our current political climate to do the most sensitive thinking in private. And there is a tension there.
So future reports, if they're known that they're going to be published, will be the poorer for them?
Well, I think there is that risk, and it would be a real risk if any government, because it was fearful of the consequences of a leak, denied itself the opportunity to do really searching, evidence-based strategic work.
If Blairism ever becomes a religious cult, do you think
if what, sorry?
I said if Blairism ever becomes a religious cult, do you think you'll be its Pope?
I am a great admirer of the Prime Ministers.